Hello from Hawaii. My name is Raghu with Raghu-nomics, working from our Raghu-nomics bunker here in Hilo, and been chipping away at a response to Jerome Powell's refusal to reduce interest rates. And so here's an article that I've been chipping away at for a couple weeks now, and it's all come together today. See if you like it. This is part one. There will be at least three parts, and one and a half of them already pretty much written. Part one, is Jerome Powell a $10 trillion hit job on America? 10 trillion is how much it costs to refinance U.S. debt at a 3% higher interest rate, as Powell insists on doing. The U.S. has about $10 trillion worth of debt to refinance over the next 5 months. That's just 10 months for $10 trillion. The Federal Reserve has never refinanced this much debt in so short a time till now. Heady days, even for them, the Feds, their biggest refinance job. I mean, $1 trillion doesn't mean anything anymore. So it's like, $10 trillion. And even that doesn't really catch our attention anymore. But we're refinancing $10 trillion, and the interest rate at which it is refinanced will decide the future of our country immediately. So that's the reason why I put in so much time and effort to write this up for you. And so there sits, adding a rate of just 3% more interest happens to also equal $10 trillion over the 30 years of a bond. So I'm going with 30 years simply to sort of incorporate all the different moving parts. There's a lot of details there, and we'll start covering those in parts 2 and 3. But that really sort of gives a sense of scale to how critical this is in getting the interest rates reduced now. A $10 trillion payday in interest is a lot of money. That's a pretty big bonus for doing nothing more than waiting a few months longer. Just wait till all the U.S. debt has been refinanced. So very suspect. So it has the look that he's just, now that $10 trillion worth of debt is there, it looks like he's trying to postpone having to cut interest rates in order to be able to get that 2, 3, 4% higher interest rate on that $10 trillion. Or is it political? So calling it a financial interest, if not theft, just seems to incorporate the gravity of the political agenda, if that also happens to be at play. And so there sits Jerome Powell waiting before cutting rates and waiting as America burns. Destroy America for a $10 trillion payday. Banks have been known to do a lot worse for a lot less. And so the obvious question that everyone seems to have missed, is Jerome Powell holding off dropping interest rates to cash in on this $10 trillion banking heist by the Federal Reserve? So rephrasing this as a monetary payday, as the banks coming together to steal from the U.S., provides the potential gravity and how sinister it may be, even if it's politically motivated and not commercially. It's just as sinister, and so just calling it a banking heist is the simple catchphrase to incorporate all of those considerations. So is Jerome Powell holding off dropping interest rates to cash in on this $10 trillion banking heist by the Federal Reserve? Every economic indicator would demand Powell cut interest rates if played by Fed rules for today's economic conditions. Everyone says it's way past time to cut interest rates, including Jerome Powell's own inference of it. So, the Republican refrain is that if this had been Joe Biden, of course, he would have cut by now. So those political considerations don't really carry the weight of how sinister this truly is, given that the entirety of the Federal Reserve's mandate independence is based exclusively on this single issue of having a politically neutral institution in order to make these calls. So if this one is being compromised, it's as serious and grave as, in fact, simply there to steal from the U.S. at the cost of their economic mandate to protect America. The talk of higher interest rates in the name of taming inflation is sheer nonsense when that $10 trillion is going to replace U.S. debt. Replacing old federal debt has little impact on inflation. No new capital has been dumped onto the market. It's a neutral dollar for dollar swap, except for the rates of interest. So whenever the Fed in general is issuing new money, that is money that's going out into the public, and so charging a higher interest rate is based upon, um, adding more money in there. A higher interest rate is there to start bringing down inflation, but this isn't an inflation issue when all we're doing is refinancing the debt. Here's where we get into the absurd part of Jerome Powell's so-called fight against inflation. His high interest rates only add inflation of what should be a neutral refinancing of a dollar-for-dollar debt swap. Adding $10 trillion more in interest costs piles on a massive 25% liability on top of our nearly $40 trillion federal debt. We don't realize how big this is, but adding that 3% more and $10 trillion literally adds 25% more debt burden to our Federal Reserve federal debt. That means that our federal debt will jump from today's 40 trillion, we're at like almost 20, 27, 28. Is it now? From today's 40 trillion to 50 trillion. Jerome Powell is giving us a $50 trillion U.S. debt this Christmas for his $10 trillion bonus. All this in just 5 months. So it sounds a little hyperbolic, but in terms of the financial harm, it's not. For Jerome Powell to talk of higher interest rates in the name of fighting inflation under these specific conditions is ass backwards any normal monetary logic. Hence, calls for cutting rates is universal and has been for months now. So even for those that are trying to be supportive of Jerome Powell, you can see them trying to, they're sort of stuttering along as they're trying to provide a overreach of justification for it. But you can see that their hearts aren't in it. And in the background is playing another counter story, and this is really sort of trying to address that in order to bring a stronger clarity of either incompetency or corruption. If you find my simple calculations wrong, please explain, but for now, a user-friendly example. Using your home makes this easier to understand. You buy a $100,000 home. Let's say the interest rate is 9%. I have to use a higher interest rate in order to make it a simple 3 times the cost. I try to keep all the numbers, at, averaged at a rounded numbers. Makes it easier for people to follow. You buy a $100,000 home. Let's say it's interest is 9%. Well, your home now costs you $300,000 as of the day of the loan. Home costs just tripled immediately. This is one of the world's great overlooked snow jobs. It's the doublespeak of banking fraud. They just charge you 3 times more money. Usually it's about 6 or 7%, and so you're going to pay about 2.5 times. But 3% just made the example easier. They charge you 3 times more money. Odd how you never quite realize it. You go off and tell your friends and family about the house you just bought for $100,000. You didn't. You're paying $300,000, 3 times more than the bank said was your purchase price. This voodoo financing scheme plays out millions of times every day. And so Powell uses that same playbook here. He says the feds are refinancing $10 trillion worth of bonds. He's not. Jerome Powell is charging us $20 trillion, not 10. Powell doubled our cost, all in the name of fighting cost, or as he calls it, inflation. Yes, absurd logic indeed. Charge double the price in the name of fighting inflation. The short form story of Powell's high interest rates. And so back to that first question. Is Jerome Powell a $10 trillion hit job on America? Certainly worth having President Trump investigate. Has Jerome Powell gone rogue? A clear line crossed, so betrayed all that the Federal Reserve mandate was to be? Any talk of Fed independence more a distraction from this $20 trillion conspiracy of fraud? Any meaningful talk to the separation of powers between the Federal Reserve and the U.S. government misses the point about this potential crime by way of policy, if not intent. In other words, if they're there to actually save America from inflation and they're doing something that's in fact making it significantly worse, it is a crime of the mandate. And that's before we get to intent. That is to say, we are not talking of inflation, but 10 trillion in debt refinancing. We need to make this point the first of any discussion. So they keep talking about, talking about this as if it's a matter of raising interest rates to fight inflation. Inflation has very little to do with this $10 trillion. It has to do with refinancing the debt. This is not a job performance review of Powell. It's more of a RICO Act legal challenge if this proves a mob-like ransacking of America. I know this sounds a little extreme, but if Jerome Powell is either dropping the ball this severely or has intentions for political sabotage or just incompetency, this is really serious. So I'm putting RICO in there in order to give it some context of the gravity. Banks have done a lot more harm for a lot less money. It's not unreasonable to wonder if Powell may be looking to rip off America, as banks have done so many times before. Or Jerome Powell could just drop interest rates that 3% and save America. A true economic superhero he will be, the one the world has been calling for him to be for months now. And so you get to decide this very day, will you raise your voice to save America against this devastating $20 trillion raid to our entire economic future? It will take you little more than sharing this with friends and family. Dear Mr. President, so let's forward this to the White House, the President, Elon Musk. He can shutter this up, scale this up. Dear Mr. President, is Jerome Powell stripping the last of America into planned economic collapse, or is it just pure incompetency? I know it sounds like a wise guy question, but given these circumstances, this is actually extreme. We're talking about $10 trillion worth of debt. We're talking about an extra $5 to $10 trillion, whether that's going to be 2, 4, 6-year bonds or 10, 20, and even 30-year bonds. So it's being treated as a casual consideration of normal interest inflation talk, and it isn't. Is Jerome Powell stripping the last of America into planned economic collapse, or is it just pure incompetency, which is to say, stripping America to economic collapse? We're right at the tipping point. If Jerome Powell gets it wrong, then nobody's going to buy our bonds, and therefore we will be paying significantly more in interest rates. Which could potentially lead to a collapse, as everybody is saying. So this isn't just me being hyperbolic. We use the term incompetent as a best case scenario. It's all the same languaging used by even the most ardent of Fed supporters, including Jerome Powell himself. He passingly admits through subterfuge that he may have waited too long. So in roundabout ways, he's saying, maybe I held out too long. This is not a simple oopsie-doopsie kind of mistake. Powell just crashed the entire U.S. economy if he comes in with too small of a cut and then the rest of the world walks away because they don't want to have anything to do with the absurdity of America's debt. Jerome Powell may well become a one-man monetary monster of economic disaster. It's a bit of a mouthful, yes, and it's a little Trump-esque in terms of calling names, but in my mind, I'm using that phrasing because I'm like thinking of Godzilla, the old Japanese television show from the 70s of Godzilla, going through Tokyo. It's literally of that brand of horrific disaster economically. As everybody's saying, put your money in gold because things might be falling. Jerome Powell is the single man that can make that change, save us from Godzilla. And hence I'm calling Jerome Powell may well become a one-man monetary monster of economic disaster. I should have just called him Godzilla, too late. Jerome is just too soft a title for what's at stake here. The America he was supposed to protect in the name and power of the Federal Reserve is a miserable failure as of this telling. So we're just not, if he's going to offset, if he's going to set into motion the collapse of the U.S. dollar, then it's a failure. And the failure at this point, we're saying the failure is actually him, because if we were to cut it appropriately, we can dodge this bullet. Some may want to blame Trump for it, but Jerome Powell can, in fact, make up for that. And he can make up for it because he, in fact, is in large part responsible by being too late to cut. Remember, this is a best case scenario. The premise that Powell is plotting to steal $10 trillion from America or destroy President Trump as a political assassination are just two of the three terrible scenarios. So is he trying to make money? Is he trying to destroy Trump? These are two scenarios. Here's the third one, and it's no better. Scenario 3, calling this misjudgment of a dotty old man's incompetency is not any more reassuring. So just saying that he's an idiot, that doesn't make things any better from him being either corrupted or politically motivated. We see the same of the unemployment report that miscalculated by nearly 1 million jobs for months. This is the tool of your trade, Mr. Powell. How you and your elk could possibly get something this massive so wrong for so long paints a picture of political fraud or extreme incompetency of the worst kind. I mean, in whatever heading you want to put it, it's just really bad. Just another day at your satellite institutions, all but defunct of any useful purpose for your job, a Fed stewardship for America's economy. So he has all these supporting institutions, such as the jobs report, in order to be able to give him a better insight of how to move. They're malfunctioning. Just another day at your satellite institutions, all but defunct of any useful purpose for your job, a Fed stewardship for America's economy. Supporters complain about calls for getting you replaced by Trump. All should be able to agree it's time to replace those institutions skewing critical data, such as our U.S. jobs report. In other words, they're saying you're an incompetent fool. And he's saying, oh, well, listen, this is what the jobs report is. This is Jerome Powell's excuse. So if that's your excuse, then you need to fix it. And if you're not, then it is right to be calling for your resignation. So that's the point that I'm making here. Supporters complain about calls for getting you replaced. All should be able to agree it's time to replace those institutions skewing critical data, such as our U.S. jobs report. Every explanation about these late reports are a poor excuse for a man leading a modern-day financial empire, the greatest in history. Mr. Powell, fix it if you care to prove your mantle as a competent leader. You can't say, oh, that's the way it works with, that's what came. No, they are his tools. They are not standalone institutions that he is a witness bystander to. Failing to do so gives us just one more talking head to a broken, outdated bureaucracy. In other words, if you can't fix it, then you're useless. You're just a talking head. We hear the hysteria about Trump's power grab over the Federal Reserve, but this request of his is the only reasonable measure being presented. You know you really screwed up when you leave Trump looking reasonable, which is what. So this is one time as brash and overbearing and arrogant and all the other things that Trump's critics want to say of him. This is one time that Trump is actually making his opponent look bad. He's really, Jerome Powell is not looking good here, even to the best of his supporters. That's a Jerome Powell issue, not Trump. So they're trying to blame Trump that, Trump is power grabbing, but it isn't. This is really Jerome Powell is really dropping the ball here. This is a Fed Jerome Powell issue, not Trump. The U.S. is the bread and butter for nations around the world. We go, and so they go too. That's the story experts and media scream about when it comes to Trump's tariffs. Trump is wrecking the world's economy, they say. Well, if that is true of Trump's tariffs, then certainly it is also to be true of Powell's high interest rates too. Please understand this little tirade here today. This is not about casting Powell some supervillain of our banking world, but rather a plea, yes, a very biting plea, in order to get their attention, but really just a humble request all the same. Please, Mr. Powell, save the world. Cut now. Cut big. Powell has finally begun to suggest his dreadful misreading of the U.S. economy. It's now time he also compensate the nation for this $1 trillion screw-up. Incompetency of judgment does have a price tag. We say it's a 3.5% cut against today's interest rate. That's the price for being such the fool. Is there anyone who cares to second this request? We here talk about a 25 to 50% basis point cut from interest rates. Way, way too little, way too late. Powell should have done this months ago. If Powell truly wants to mend his harm and the trillions lost in economic activity, he will have to cut by a lot. You freaking messed up big time. You have to freaking pay big time. Powell has to drop 350 basis points, or in layman terms, reduce the Fed interest rates by 3.5%. Refinance America's $10 trillion at a low 1% interest rate. That is the least of economic gestures compared to the global devastation wrought upon the billions of people impacted by Powell's horrific misjudgment. A long sentence, but it's really saying that because America is struggling so much because of these high interest rates, so many of the other countries and potentially likely billions of other people are struggling as well. If we were doing better and we had more money in our pockets and we're buying more, it would do wonders for billions of people around the world. Who will second our plea here today? Who will join our call? Mr. Jerome Powell, please cut our interest rates by this 3.5%. Be the hero the world now calls upon. That is your special superpower, or the failing that may well prove your criminal undoing. So I'll try to get part 1 and part 2 and 3 done in the next day or so as a follow-up. But if you like over here, I mean, there's really no downside. If inflation absolutely explodes in the next 3 months, raise the interest rates after the debt has been refinanced. Get that $10 trillion out of the way, and then raise interest rates 20% if you need to. But for this $10 trillion, it needs to be a low interest rate, and the fact that he hasn't is truly suspect. If you want that kind of accountability, share this little simple video with friends and family. Have a beautiful day, and big aloha from the big island of Hawaii. Here in the little writing corner, call it the bunker, the writer's bunker retreat. Aloha.